Good day, everyone. Today, I want to talk about something that is not just a word or a virtue, but a way of living. That word is compassion. What is compassion really? How do we live it out? Not just feel it when it comes to the way we care for others, for the environment, and even for our school community. And finally, what role does communal discernment play in all of this? What happens when people don't just decide things on their own, but come together to reflect and act for the common good? These questions are important, especially now, because we live in a world where people are quick to judge, quick to divide, quick to speak, but slow to listen. We live in a world that sometimes tells us, just look out for yourself, but compassion tells us we belong to each other. So, what is compassion? Let me be clear. Compassion is more than just feeling bad when you see someone suffering. It's more than saying, I feel sorry for them, or reacting with a sad emoji on social media. Compassion goes deeper. It means recognizing someone else's pain and being moved to act. It's not pity. Pity stands from a distance and says, oh, poor you. But compassion steps closer and says, I'm here with you. It doesn't look down. It reaches out. It stands beside. Compassion is about connection. It's about seeing people as human beings, not just as problems or burdens. And sometimes compassion means doing something uncomfortable, like standing up for someone or taking time to care when it's not convenient. So let's bring it down to the level of our everyday lives. What does compassion look look like in our daily routines? It's not always grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's in the small, quiet moments. Imagine a classmate who always sits alone. Most people walk past not out of cruelty, but maybe because they don't know what to say. But you take the first step. You sit, you sit beside them. You ask how they are doing. You include them in a group project or even invite them to lunch. That small act, that's compassion. And it can mean the world. Or think about a friend who's clearly stressed out about uh, an upcoming exam. Instead of just saying, good luck, you show up. You study with them. You encourage them or you simply listen. It doesn't fix everything, but it reminds them they're not alone. There was even one student I knew who noticed that their seatmate often came to school without lunch. No big announcement, no big gesture. He just started bringing an extra snack every day, quietly, consistently, without needing recognition. That's compassion in action. No words, just care. But compassion doesn't stop with people. It extends to how we treat our environment. Now I know compassion for the environment might sound abstract, but it's real and it's urgent. The earth is not just a resource, it's our shared home. And when we harm it, we also harm the communities that depend on it the most, especially the less privileged, the vulnerable, and future generations. For example, in one school, students noticed that their canteen was still using a lot of single-use plastics, spoons, cups, straws. Instead of ignoring it, they started a small campaign. They talked to the staff, they suggested changes. Eventually, the school began encouraging reusable containers and tumblers. That didn't happen overnight. It took effort, but it was born out of compassion for the earth and for the people most affected by pollution. Even on our campus, we've seen efforts like this. Students organizing cleanup drives, starting eco-brick projects, or leading campaigns to reduce food waste. These aren't just environmental efforts; they are acts of compassion. Why? Because they protect creation and they protect people, especially those who live near polluted areas or rely on natural resources for survival. We often think of compassion as something we feel, but even more important than the feeling is what we do. True compassion shows itself in action. It's when you help someone feel seen, supported, and respected. It could be speaking up when someone's being treated unfairly. It could be advocating for mental health, organizing peer support groups, or just checking on someone who's been quiet lately. It could be reducing your carbon footprint, using less plastic, commuting responsibly, not just for the planet, but for the people already suffering from climate disasters. Compassion is not always convenient. Sometimes it requires sacrifice, but it is always worth it. Because in every compassionate action, you say you matter. You matter. This world matters. Our future matters. So now let's shift now to something deeply connected to compassion. Communal discernment. You might ask, what is that? It's not just a religious term. It's a process, a habit, a way of being together. Communal discernment is when we pause, reflect, and listen together before we act. It means looking not just at what's best for one person, but what's best for the whole group. In the world that's always rushing, posting, reacting, judging, communal discernment teaches us to slow down, to listen before we speak, and to consider more than just ourselves. What does this look like in school? Let's say the student council wants to launch a new program. Instead of just making decisions on their own, they conduct surveys. They host open forums. They ask, what do students really need? That is discernment. In one instance, students with learning difficulties shared that they often felt excluded in group work. So, after thoughtful discussion, the council worked with teachers to create more inclusive project guidelines. That is compassion, made possible through discernment. Another time, a club was planning a social event, but during a meeting, someone pointed out that many classmates couldn't even afford basic school supplies. After a heartfelt discussion, the members made a bold choice: cancel the event and use the funds to support those in need. That decision wasn't easy, but it was born from listening, reflecting, and choosing what was more loving. So why this matters? So why does all this matter? Because we are forming habits not just for school but for life. If we learn to live with compassion And if we learn to discern together, we won't just be good students. We will be better friends, better leaders, better human beings. In a world that moves too fast, compassion and discernment reminds us to slow down and ask, who is being left out? Who is hurting? Are my choices helping others or hurting them? In a compassionate community, we don't just ask, is this good for me? We ask, is this good for us? That's the kind of question that leads to a more inclusive, just, and sustainable future. Now imagine what our school, our PU, could feel like if we truly lived this way. A school where no one feels invisible, where differences are respected, where people are free to speak up and safe enough to be heard. Imagine a school where student leaders listen, not just to loud voices, but also to silences. Where every choice we make, from school events to environmental policies, is rooted in compassion and communal discernment. That kind of school doesn't appear magically. It's built by all of us. With every choice we make, with every act of core, with every moment of listening. So I leave you with this. Compassion is not weakness. It is strength. It takes courage to care. It takes humility to listen. It takes wisdom to act, not just for ourselves but for others. And so I ask you, what does compassion look like in your life? Who do you need to listen more deeply? What action can you take today to make someone's life a little better? Let's choose to build that kind of world. Not later, not someday. Starting here, starting now, starting with us. Thank you.